Welcome to the chaos sector. We return to the Matrix. If you were given $1 billion, what would you do with it? I'm sure you'd invest wisely, perhaps put most of it away and invest some of it into a business venture. Well, there are some out there who would end up squandering it away and find themselves in debt. How is that possible? Well, when you lack financial literacy, then you spend money when you should be saving it. Financial literacy, yes, a major problem in society, but also in politics. Financial literacy provides an individual with the tools to save, budget, invest, common practices everyone should have fundamental knowledge of. But when someone is given a large amount of money, such as billions of dollars, and they don't implement these tools, well, they find themselves in a deep hole. Kamala Harris raised over $1 billion in approximately 100 days and is currently $20 million in debt after her presidential campaign. What the hell? How do you end up in debt after such an historic fundraising campaign? It's simple, actually. Horrible financial advisors and financial illiteracy. If you average her fundraising out over those 100 plus days, Harris averaged a whopping $10 million per day on her campaign. That is flat out ridiculous, right? $10 million per day in 100 days, and you still lost horribly? It's one of the most humiliating presidential campaigns in the history of US politics. I mean, really think about this because the numbers are unreal. If we look at the spending monthly for approximately 3.5 months of campaigning, Harris spent about $330 million a month. The silver lining in this is it magnifies the political corruption and how money has ruled political parties and politicians as money is funneled through campaigns from wealthy and rich donors. Now here's the thing, a lot of that money was not for political ads. Oh no, it was paying those Hollywood celebrities to be guest speakers at her rallies. You see, how many celebrities did Harris have? Let's see, you had Oprah Winfrey, Beyonce, and Kelly Rowland, Cardi B, Glorilla. You had Eminem, Magic Johnson, Taylor Swift, Megan Thee Stallion, Quavo from the Migos, Jennifer Lopez, Lizzo, Bruce Springsteen, Julia Roberts, Meryl Streep, Ben Stiller, George Clooney, of course, and more Hollywood celebrities publicly endorsing Harris. These so-called celebrities always support Democratic candidates, and many of them represent the very problem that led to the landslide victory for Trump. And that is out-of-touch rich elites who have forgotten what it's like to budget your grocery expenses monthly, as the price of common goods have put a financial burden on the working class. They do not speak for the majority of the population. So why are they always running to endorse presidential candidates? For attention, that's all they care about, their own narcissistic soapbox being the center of attention. Now it is speculated that the Harris campaign paid many of those artists to be guests at her rallies, as some of them did perform, such as Megan Thee Stallion. There is a claim that Beyonce was paid $10 million to be a guest speaker in a rally in Houston, Texas, which she spoke for a few minutes then skipped town. If we look at all of these Hollywood endorsements and suggest that these individuals were paid millions of dollars, then, well, $1 billion will quickly start to vanish. And even more disturbing is they did not actually do a great job at rallying American voters to support Harris neither. This is because, once again, no matter how many celebrities you dump out there, the candidate still has the final voice of motivation, and Harris definitely lacked in that department. So not only does she suffer one of the worst election losses in US politics, she also ended up broke and in debt. History keeps repeating itself with Harris because she is not learning any political lessons. We tried to give her the benefit of the doubt in analyzing her political career. After being obliterated by Tulsi Gabbard in her official presidential campaign, Harris should have stepped back and took some time to reevaluate the political landscape, as she was not prepared to deal with tough competition. Instead, she decided to accept Old Joe's nomination for vice president. Again, stepping into a political landscape at the second most powerful position in politics, filled with landmines ready to explode. And did they ever? She stepped on the biggest landmine, and that was being assigned the border czar. Mass immigration. Illegals crossing the borders by the hundreds of thousands, illegal immigrants raping and murdering U.S. citizens, including other immigrants crossing the border. Child, sex, and drug trafficking at an all-time high. And Harris was like a deer caught in the headlights, not having the slightest clue of what to do about it because she was not qualified to handle that assignment. But she accepted that assignment. That is not a job you treat as, quote, on the job training experience. It's the freaking U.S. border with real human beings and real dangers. Now she's in too deep. Old Joe steps down. He then once again nominates her for another position she isn't qualified for. And here she goes again, accepting a role she is clearly out of her league in obtaining. Instead of suggesting to the old blue dogs in Pelosi and Schumer that she isn't prepared to run for president, her ego, and I guess we can also say a bit of ignorance, Harris accepted the nomination. She could have took that opportunity to voice her opinion about her insecurities her lack of experience, and just her sheer lack of confidence. Hold another primary, very quick and direct. No need for the extra political ads and mudslinging. Short and sweet Democratic presidential debates between several candidates. And if she comes out on top, then so be it. But ignorance is bliss, as they say in The Matrix. And when you combine that ignorance with an inflated ego, you end up with someone who discovered the hard way that politics is not what you think. Kamala Harris is an example of someone who sought power and wasn't even remotely close to being qualified to be in the same room as such political figures. Through the women's empowerment movement politics, Harris felt compelled to pursue the political mission of her predecessor, Hillary Clinton. The tunnel vision of obtaining the most powerful seat in politics corrupted Hillary Clinton to the point she lost all sense of reality. She wasn't always that way, but when the ego is empowered from a place of, ego, then you end up with corruption. Kamala Harris saw what was in front of her, saw the mission, and tried to accomplish what her handlers couldn't accomplish in prior presidential elections. Women empowerment is outdated. Women have power. This is not the early 1950s. So this modern movement is rooted in ego, and it only destroys all of the efforts women had in the past when they didn't have the same opportunities as their male counterparts. Good causes are often infiltrated by bad actors, and those good causes turn into bad causes. It's that simple. The feminist movement was founded on the belief that women deserve to be valued more than just housewives, more than just baby makers, and deserve a place in the workplace, in politics, and even leadership. But it was hijacked by ego. Even politics itself was genuinely for the people, but as we always point out, it was hijacked by ego. Ego is why corruption exists, by the way. But let's get back to the greenbacks, because that was horrific. It's one thing to lose a presidential election, but to squander billions of dollars away and end up in debt. Harris is building quite the political resume, and it's not impressive to say the least.
Everyone is ranting about what Kamala Harris could have done different. It was a huge mistake to rely on Hollywood celebrities, messaging and all, but the facts are she just wasn't qualified. Don't get me wrong, there were things she should have done differently, to perhaps make an actual dog fight, at least at face value. But Harris was never manning or womaning the ship. The wealthy elites and rich donor class control that campaign, and they definitely aren't in tune with the everyday American citizens. They believe the push for women's rights, tolerance of illegal immigrants based on children and families, and gender identity were things the American people would favor over Trump's nationalism policies. And I would even suggest it's not that they're out of touch, it's that they don't care about the average American citizens. Old Joe was dumped and Harris plugged in, and the campaign raised over $1 billion only to magnify how corrupt political campaigns are. Money can't compensate for lack of morality, lack of firm and comprehensive policies, lack of messaging, and to be honest, lack of political intelligence. You can dump, billions of dollars into a candidate's presidential campaign and fall flat on your face come election night. Democrats, as we mentioned before, they fight with money, not morality. It was humiliating, and of course being true to their character. They start to stab each other in the back once things don't go as planned. A former DNC official came out and took shots at Harris's campaign. Lindy Lee, a DNC official, went viral in her criticisms of the campaign financial blunders. Quote, DNC official calls Harris campaign a $1 billion disaster. Democratic National Committee official Lindy Lee called Vice President Harris's bid for the White House a $1 billion disaster, following her loss to President-elect Trump in the 2024 presidential election. Quote, the truth is this is just an epic disaster. This is a $1 billion disaster, a DNC National Finance Committee member said during her Saturday morning appearance on Fox and Friends Weekend. So Lee decided to come out and scrutinize the Harris campaign for squandering a $1 billion fundraising effort, which led to Harris's bubbly joyride disintegrating into a cloud of magic pixie dust. Quote, they're $20 million or $18 million in debt. It's incredible, and I raised millions of that. I have friends I have to be accountable to and explain what happened because I told them it was a margin of error race. Unquote. So Lee is claiming that she is held accountable to friends and had to explain what happened. What does she mean by held accountable, though? You know what it sounds like to me? It sounds like Lee was supposed to be paid a large sum of money out of that $1 billion investment. Then those friends were supposed to be paid, yet Lee was stiffed. They were left out in the cold with Harris's loss. Yep, that sounds about right. Think here. If Harris hadn't lost in such a devastating way, do you think Lee would be publicly scrutinizing her campaign and the money raised? Negative, because Lee stated that she thought it was a margin of error race. This is about money, my friends, and she didn't get her greenbacks and is whining about it. Or there's another scenario, which is just as logical. I tend to think she was paid pretty well, which leads me to believe that those so-called friends she speaks of, that she's accountable to, are, get this, voters. Oh yes, you see, these are the paid voters we speak of. And they didn't have enough funds to pay all of the artificial voters after the election, because they squandered all of the money away and ended up $20 million in debt. They couldn't pay them during the election cycle, because the RNC, headed by Laura Trump, were running around like Inspector Gadget looking for voter fraud. So they promised those artificial voters after the election, regardless of the outcome, you will be compensated for voting for Kamala Harris. There wouldn't be election fraud this way, at least legally speaking. No bueno. And Lindy Lee is executing damage control, trying to stave off the clear evidence of suspicious activity in Harris's fundraising amount, her spending, and how she ended up in debt after the election. To be fair, she may be innocent doing her job fundraising and such, but I lean towards her more concerned about the money aspect of the campaign, because there was corruption and criminal activity in how the money was raised and how the money was being swished around. Let's continue. Quote, the strategist said that Harris's campaign chair, Jen O'Malley Dillon, quote, promised all of us that Harris would win. She even put videos out saying Harris would win. I believed her, my donors believed her, and so they wrote massive checks. I just feel like a lot of us were misled, unquote. Again, Lee is playing the role of a whimsical victim. She is involved in politics. She knew Kamala Harris was a walking air balloon ready to be popped. There is no way she actually thought Harris would win, unless, that's right, unless all of the crooked dark money floating around, which was not used to endorse the candidate, but used to pay artificial voters, would catapult her into the White House. It didn't happen, and now she's executing damage control and jumping ship. Yep, following Trump's runaway triumph in the contest Wednesday, Democrats have started to clash over the strategy, the party deployed, and who should be blamed for the election's outcome. Wait, what in the world? Who should be blamed? How about blaming the person who lost? There's a start. You see, they're telling you the truth right here. Harris was not in control of her campaign, meaning she wasn't in control of what message was sent, what policy was proposed, even what interviews she had. It was all provided for her. It says it clear as day. Democrats have started to clash over the strategy the party deployed and who should be blamed for it. It doesn't say Democrats have started to clash over the strategy that Kamala Harris deployed. Oh no. It says the party. If you have a candidate who is not in control of their presidential campaign, how do you expect them to resonate with the American people? They will be seen as someone forced into that role. Oh wait, that's what happened. Anywho, some argue the party did not move to the left enough. Again, they keep saying the party, and not the presidential candidate running the goddamn campaign. Some argue the party did not move to the left enough to satisfy the base, while centrists argue the party moved too far left and spooked away the more moderate backers in the swing states. Harris lost all 7 battleground states. Let's go over this a moment. It's insane. Some argue that the party did not move to the left enough to satisfy the base, while centrists argue the party moved too far left and spooked away moderates. Quick question. What is the Democratic Party's base here? Well, it has become progressive. And although Kamala Harris is considered liberal, and even some elements of progressive, she is nowhere near as progressive as the wackos in the party, especially in Congress. We've often said that she advocated to the base, because that is the power of the party. And when it came down to just flat out proposing those progressive ideals in her campaign, she didn't have the courage to do it, because the election would have been over before it even started. Hence, the moderate Harris was formed, which nobody fell for. Anywho, some within the party have said that Democrats should restart and begin focusing more on messaging, and to better assess the temperature of the electorate. Yeah, good luck with that. Lee said that even on the night of the election, she heard Democrats express confidence in Harris's hopes of winning the election, something Lee herself did not fully understand. Quote, I asked them, are you privy to internal numbers that I am not seeing? Because I study this so carefully, and I just wasn't seeing any basis for that level of confidence. Unquote. The conclusion here is Lindy Lee was raising money to pay off artificial voters, something that Jen O'Malley did prior for old Joe to so-called beat Trump. This was her operation essentially, and Lee may come out and literally expose the dark money secret. Let's touch on this Jen O'Malley individual while we're at it, because these are the corrupt buffoons lurking in the shadows. O'Malley ran old Joe's 2020 presidential campaign. She later became deputy chief of staff. Now, during old Joe's campaign, what stood out the most? Well, the comments about black people not being black if they chose Trump. Yeah, good job in making sure the old fart doesn't offend a major voting bloc of the Democratic Party. But let's connect the dots into why they went on to vote for him anyway. Now many claim this is fake news, and so-called fact-checkers came out and debunked the claim. But O'Malley allegedly was arrested in an investigation into ballot harvesting. One source of this report is Real Raw News. Good name, by the way. Quote, U.S. Army Rangers on Wednesday arrested former Biden campaign manager and current Deputy Chief of Staff, Jennifer Bridget O'Malley Dillon, at a Washington, D.C. hotel, the result of a military investigation. This investigation was whether she took part in a ballot harvesting ring in which Democrat and liberal sympathizers, known as mules, illegally collected and deposited ballots into drop boxes in Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin during the 2020 presidential election. According to a JAG source, which stands for Judge Advocate General, white hats took interest in Dillon after viewing conservative author Dinesh D'Souza's video, 2,000 Mules, which shows surveillance video of seedy individuals making repeated trips to drop boxes in the aforementioned states. In each instance, the mules carried reams of ballots. The video, our source said, sounded alarm bells in the white hat community and prompted a thorough probe. Although Dillon goes unmentioned in D'Souza's video, the military began its investigation at the crest of Biden's election hierarchy, believing that she, who became Biden's campaign manager in April of 2020, had knowledge of the scheme or orchestrated it. Our source would not at this time cite specific evidence, but said JAG had obtained from U.S. Army Cyber Command concrete proof linking her to innumerable illegal ballots. Unquote. Now, of course, this was immediately slated fake news, misinformation, disinformation, blah, blah, blah. But wait, you don't just pluck O'Malley out as being a ringleader of a ballot harvesting operation, right? There has to be something that this so-called fake website obtained. Mind you, the article is not the source of the information they are reporting on the issue. Here's the thing, even if there isn't evidence that O'Malley was involved in ballot harvesting in 2020, the actual documentary by Dinesh D'Souza exists called 2,000 Mules. And it breaks down the very scenario of how mules are used to inflate votes for a particular presidential candidate. In fact, the very states that were mentioned in that article were the very states that were at the center of the allegations. Arizona, Georgia. We even exposed the election fraud in Georgia at State Farm's Arena. You had Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And Democrats used election officials and even the Supreme Court's ruling of no election fraud as proof that there was an election fraud. Oh well, isn't that good enough? If surveillance footage is showing election fraud, and yet election officials claim there isn't, and the Supreme Court's rule that there isn't, what do you think? It was allowed. That's simple. Now, don't you find it strange that after the 2020 election, the RNC hired Laura Trump to oversee the election process, and Kamala Harris lost in all battleground states, which some of these states are. Harris lost in Arizona, a battleground state. She lost in Georgia, another battleground state. She lost in Michigan, another battleground state. Lost in Pennsylvania, another battleground state. And Wisconsin, another battleground state. Do you think this was a case of a Harris campaign lacking a message? Sure. That's only a microcosm of her defeat. They lost because they couldn't cheat, as the RNC made sure there wasn't the same type of cheating that occurred in the previous election. And I'm going to support the allegations against O'Malley, because she told Lindy Lee, quote, Harris is going to win the election, unquote. Although they couldn't cheat the way they normally do, through ballot harvesting, they tried to pay off individuals to vote for Harris. And this is why she felt confident she would win. Got destroyed, now $20 million in debt, and campaign workers and other staff are looking for their cut. But it's poetic justice. You participated in the cheating, end up broke, just like the candidate you cheated for. I'm done.
Listen, Democrats are professional swindlers. They know how to work the system. They've been doing it forever. Why do you think they focus on certain demographics in society as opposed to every American citizen? It's because those demographics are used as tools to swindle for political power. Again, 90% of the black vote for Kamala Harris were black women. There is no way those black women genuinely voted for her, the same way they didn't genuinely vote for her predecessor in Old Joe. Women, another key demographic that they continue to swindle for political power. Using women's rights and abortion as their political football, it always works, but not when those women are struggling financially. They start to come back down to reality, so to speak. Young people, always a key demographic, just off pure ignorance and fueled by emotion and rebellion. It aligns with the liberal and progressive ideology of the party. They swindle them by utilizing that emotion and rebellion, convincing them they relate to that rebellious nature. Moderate Democrats stray away from this pandering, but they have become the minority of the party. All of this nonsense on social media are wacky liberal feminists and progressives. The main problem, Oh, you're going to vow to hold back sex from men because of an election? What does that symbolize actually? Because if you support abortion so much, shouldn't you be having more sex with men so you can have more abortions? You see, they're so angry, they don't know where to target that anger, so they target it towards men. Of course, the gender war being refueled. You have losers claiming to distance themselves from family members who voted for Trump. Yeah, let's see how long that lasts when you're down on your luck and that Trump voting family member offers a helping hand. But I would tend to think you've already distanced yourself from a significant number of family members already, right? Surely there were those who voted for Trump in 2016 and even 2020. If you continue down that path, you might not have any family members left. Boy, I tell ya, shaving their heads just for views on TikTok. And many have pointed this out. They actually would rather Trump win than Harris win, because angry and bitter people want something to empower that anger and bitterness. If Harris had won, they wouldn't have been happy. Anger fuels their existence in the public space. The same with the mainstream media. If Harris had won, nobody would tune in to CNN and MSNBC. They should thank Trump, because he has indirectly given them pay raises at their networks. Their shows have had some of the most viral panel discussions and debates, and many people actually know these hosts by name, when they probably wouldn't even acknowledge them otherwise. They discussed this in private, by the way, over glasses of wine, talking about how Trump has helped them get that $1 million home and such. Bonkers.
Well said. Democrats are playing tough-nosed defense right now because they are on the brink of not only falling apart but also being exposed for all of the previous criminal activity. O'Malley becomes Old Joe's campaign chair in April of 2020. He ends up winning that presidential election, in which there were very suspicious occurrences late in the polling, such as late ballots being counted, and all of a sudden late in the race, Old Joe pulled ahead in states where he was either leading by a slim margin or was down by a slim margin. Who is overseeing all of this suspicious activity? Well, individuals like Jen O'Malley, who organized Democratic mules deploying them out to polling stations, dropping off fraudulent ballots. I mean, there have been deceased people on ballots, for fuck's sake. Can't get any more evident of election fraud than that, right? Anywho, the same concept, but applied differently this time around with Harris. Democrats thought that money was going to put her over the top, and it only exposed how corrupt and politically dishonest they are. Here's the main point. Kamala Harris had her chance. It passed her by. When she was fresh blood running around in wacky world of San Francisco, that was her time to strike while the iron was hot. She could have run for mayor, perhaps even governor, and she'd be another wacky Democratic dictator in the state of California. But she waited too late and became burdened by what has been. Now she's stuck in a world of young progressives who are a high-octane machine of lunatics. It's not her speed. She's just a good old San Francisco liberal in nature. The same with Old Joe. He definitely was overwhelmed by the spoiled grandchildren. Progressives are like cannibals. They will eat themselves to survive. So what do you think they will do to those who oppose their ideology? And Harris is not politically strong enough to withstand such savagery. She tried to appeal to that base, and what did they do? They disowned her, such as Rashida Tlaib, who decided not to endorse her for president. Think about how savage that is, you know? Here you have a woman who is a Democrat, a woman of color who is a Democrat running for president, and another woman of color who is a Democrat decides not to endorse her. Now, the reason Tlaib didn't endorse Harris is because she didn't publicly denounce Israel and support Palestine. How about endorsing her? She becomes president. And then there will be negotiations about potentially Harris indirectly supporting Palestine over Israel. I mean, at least Harris is willing to side with you, right? Isn't that enough? Don't you want the suffering to cease for the Palestinian people? You don't know what Harris would, or could, possibly get done as president of the United States. Oh no. Tlaib wanted Harris to literally come out in front of the nation, in front of the entire world, and denounce support for Israel. And because she didn't spit in Netanyahu's face on the world stage, Tlaib decided to spit in Harris's face on the world stage. Because of it, Harris is not from this breed of Democrats. She does have some sense of what's right. You see, we've blasted Harris for being politically ignorant. Not knowing the inner workings, we've even called her an airhead. For political analysis, it's all fair game based on her actions and what she states. But the cold-blooded truth is, as I stated before, she's in a progressive firestorm in the Democratic Party and doesn't know which way to turn. You have Tlaib holding anti-Israel signs during Netanyahu's congressional speech. Kamala Harris didn't attend, as she was off at some sorority event. And now that I think about it, She perhaps didn't want to attend because it would in fact look bad for her as the presidential candidate at that time. Mind you, old Joe had already stepped aside, and Harris was the presidential nominee. Unofficially, I might add. But progressives are like children. And if there was ever a time that Harris needed to show strength, a key component of being the leader of a nation, she should have attended the congressional speech and simply told those spoiled brats to sit down and shut up. And because she was currently the vice president of the United States, which holds the second highest seat of power in the nation, and also running for the highest seat of power as president, they would either sit down and shut up or be escorted out of the building. Might hurt their little feelings, but there is a foreign ally present, and we will not disrespect one of our allies. But again, I could see Tlaib not endorsing Harris after that scenario. Sure. And that just goes to show how radically obsessed these progressives are with obtaining power. I think it's safe to say we have witnessed the problem in the Democratic Party. First, old Joe was pushed out because the progressives used him, thinking he will implement all of their anti-American ideals into law. He wasn't willing to go bonkers in doing so, and he was kicked to the curb. Then Kamala Harris was next up to bat. Although she was obviously more liberal than old Joe, Harris realized that her liberal views pale in comparison to what progressives truly want. And we saw that in her presidential campaign. She froze up because she couldn't actually propose the things that the bullies anticipated her to push for them. As a result, she ended up lost and confused, nowhere to turn to, can't get support from the progressives. They have no real connection to the Democratic Party, to be honest. And Harris had already alienated herself with moderate Democrats as a liberal. The problem is rearing its ugly head for the nation to see, and it's the progressives who have single-handedly destroyed the fabric of that party. So going back to the questions that Democrats posed to themselves regarding what went wrong and who is to blame, you have your answer, and you know who is to blame. Because although Harris was a weak candidate, she was just another victim of bullying, the same way her predecessor was bullied. It's fucking wacky as hell, right? The Joyless Reeds, the Rachel Madman Madhouse, the Jen Sacklunch Sakis. These are examples of progressives who have shown how quickly they will turn on you, blame the voters, even accuse them of being racist and bigots. They will even turn on their own political party to save face on their network. It's a savagery that spans beyond the typical liberal nonsense. So in conclusion, Trump won, not because he was outright spectacular. He is pushing 80 years old. Sure, his policies are fundamentally aligned with the American citizen. But moderate Democrats are not stupid, and they do not support what has become of their party. It was the spirit of progressives that shrouded Kamala Harris, almost paralyzing her into a political coma, which really dug her into a deeper hole. And unfortunately for her, the political trials she has endured so far does not help her going forward. It begs the question, was she actually a decent candidate, but was not capable of showing what she could truly do? The evidence is there. We've broken it down. Nevertheless, hopefully she can find a way out of that $20 million debt. Perhaps Oprah Winfrey will loan her the cash. Doubt it. This is the Chaos Sector.